Namaste. Welcome to this session. We have been dealing with abhyasa, which is means of restraint of mind or chitta, and abhyasa is effort to be steady the mind. The efforts which are endorsed by yoga, endorsed by philosophy, endorsed by adhyatma, when those means are adhered to or applied, that becomes abhyasa. So, applying the means is what is paramount. It is not whether you succeed or to whatever extent you succeed, that is not important. But applying the means, taking recourse to means, embracing the means, just that is abhyasa. So, in the last session, we considered that very important concept of field of activity, and there is much to think over that concept of field of activity. Now, usually what happens to be steady the mind, we think we must work on the mind, and that is what a lay person would think. If the mind is to be restrained, the mind must be restrained. If the mind has to be restrained, the mind should be restrained. So we think it is something to be done on the mind, for the mind to become steady. So, and if it is something to be done for body, we think it is to be done by the body for the body. So this is what is common man's notion, idea about it. So when here the effort to be steady the mind is mentioned, it is not that we must be doing something with the mind itself. In yoga technology, it is so important to understand that effort to be steady the mind in yogic process or in the measures mentioned in adhyatma or yoga, the measures are to be taken even on the plane of body. And yoga identifies this. And then when something has to be done through the body for the mind, or through the senses for the mind, through the mind for the mind, yoga identifies one more important aspect. It is the breath. It doesn't occur to common man that the breath can be such a potent conditioner of the mind. And moreover, it is associated condition. Associated body, which comes out of preparatories of yoga, becomes wonderful tool, very powerful tool, significant tool, a force to reckon with, to be steadying the mind. So associated body is quite different, way different than mere body. Similarly, associated mind is way different than merely the mind. Common man has no idea of this. Mental discipline means discipline of the mind. Physical discipline means discipline of the body. Now, they do not understand that there is an associated condition and that is possible, probable, plausible. And yoga has grabbed that aspect and has worked with it wonderfully well. So, the means to restrain the mind or quieten the mind or be steady the mind is attempted not only from the plane of channel of the mind, but also from the channel of the associated body, associated breath, associated senses. and of course associated mind. The point is somewhere we have to understand the potency, the potentials, the endowments of associated conditions. That's the most important precept in yoga. Yoga doesn't deal with body. Yoga doesn't deal with mind. Yoga doesn't deal with senses, which is common man's process, or even the scientific mind will be going that way. Modern mind, scientific mind, pragmatic mind, rational mind will be going that way. These are such matters in the human embodiment that they can be taken to associated conditions, then needed conditions, and then unified conditions. So far the man has not really identified the potentials of body, mind, breath, senses, organ, psyche, consciousness in associated conditions, in needed conditions. And that is actually the material of yoga. So every practitioner needs to explore the potentials, what the body can do, and then what associated body can do. And yoga has a process, technology to get them in association, get them in a needed condition, get them into unified condition. And then it is a marvel as to what associated body can do, what associated senses can do, what associated mind can do, what associated breath can do. Otherwise, in non-associated condition, the body can do only physical acts, mind can do only mental acts, breath can do only breathly acts, senses can do only sensely acts or sensory acts. So this is what the anatomy has explored. And so it goes on describing what body can do, what psychology with anatomy, physiology will say what mind can do. So also what senses can do. So there are physical activities of the body, there are sensory activities of the senses, there are mental activities of the mind, and there are breathly activities of the breath. And unfortunately, breathly activities is just to keep ourselves alive, living, animate, and carry out that basic function in biology to oxygenate the system and decarbon dioxylate the system. That is only the function that is identified by even modern pragmatism, modern sciences, modern man, and without taking to recourse to yoga, I think for another couple of millennia, the man will not be able to explore much more than that. But yoga explores these associated conditions, and then there is a marvel, associated body, which is a body, mind, breath, senses, organ, psyche, compound condition can work significantly to be steady the mind. So that becomes a channel to be steady the mind. Associated breath becomes another channel, perhaps the most prominent, most powerful channel to be steady the mind. So also the senses will work for be steadying the mind. And the mind, of course, can work for be steadying the mind. So this is a marvelous exploration, discovery of yoga, yogis, science of yoga, technology of yoga. And therefore the measures can be taken on all these fronts. Then therefore you can identify that in all the practices which yoga mentions, such as 5 yamas, 5 niyamas, this is what we presume and assume and think that what one needs to do as practice of yoga. Practice yamas, practice niyamas, practice asana, practice pranayama, practice pratyahara, and practice what is called in a sundry way as meditation or dhyana. So these are the practices we know which are mentioned in yoga. So the point is, in associated conditions, there are different potentials. These are different chemical statuses of the embodiment. Otherwise, physical body is made up of body matter, skin, flesh, muscles, bones, tissues, etc. But associated body, it's a different matter. So also the mind. Otherwise, mind matter means we see that there is something, act of thinking, act of sensing, act of feeling, act of knowing, etc., etc. But associated mind is a marvel. Associated senses is a marvel. And associated breath, of course, is the greatest marvel. So, with this background, now we can see that there are certain physical components of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, samadhi. And there are some mental components of yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, samadhi, where the very important force to reckon with is the breath. So those who are just carrying out theoretical studies in yoga will not understand the potentials of the breath to be working that way. Now here, if we try to have this classification, the physical components of Ashtanga and mental components or Chaitik components of Ashtanga, we should know that here we have all associated conditions. In associated conditions, the body works differently. Like you see, the wheat flour. Now, wheat flour, just looking at wheat flour, we can't imagine what it can be doing because it is something like very powdery matter, dry matter, soft and powdery matter. We can't imagine what it can be doing just as wheat flour. As a matter of fact, wheat flour is not really used purely as wheat flour. So also, water is not purely used as edible, eatable thing. So also oil. We do not consume oil just like that, raw oil. But if we need oil, water and the wheat flour together, it can turn out marvelous matter by which you can roll out chapatis and parotas, puris. So you know those things. When these things come together in a needed condition, then they are totally different material as to what they can do. Otherwise, try to understand as just material what the water can do, what the oil can do, what the wheat flour can do. But that very one who discovered that act of kneading perhaps deserves a Nobel Prize. Because what you can turn out is kind of bread, kind of chapati, kind of parotas, kind of puris that you cannot even imagine from wheat flour. But when they come together, flour, water, oil come together, and when there is a needed condition, needing process to have a needed condition of the matter, it's really a marvel. Another example I will give you about the celestial nectar, the cup of tea. Cup of tea. Now, cup of tea is made up of what? Tea leaves, sugar, water, milk. Now, looking at the water, you can't even imagine that there can be a celestial hot beverage like cup of tea. Looking at the milk too, you can't imagine. Looking at sugar, you cannot imagine. Looking at tea leaves, you cannot imagine that there can be a terrestrial nectar, or it becomes celestial hot beverage. But when they come together in a process, when they come together in a proportion, you turn out altogether what cannot be imagined by merely looking at the ingredients. Look at just ingredients. In the time when there was no idea of tea, imagine some thousands of years back, 2000, 5000, 10,000 years back, when the tea as a hot beverage was not known at all. Looking at the ingredients of it, nobody could have imagined. But again, somebody who really invented that beverage, cup of tea, again deserves a Nobel Prize. Because that's a marvelous exploration, marvelous invention, marvelous discovery, whatever you may like to call it. Now that is bewitching the mankind for last 1000, 2000 years, and will continue to bewitch for time to come, maybe even 10, 15 millennia or more. So when they come together in a process, and when it becomes a compound, see how it is, what it is. The anatomy did not ever imagine anything like that. This is body matter, this is mind matter, this is breath matter, or this is body, this is mind, this is breath, this is senses. Yoga imagined needed condition. Yogis, yoga technology, from time immemorial discovered this condition of associated condition. Now let's try to understand how, otherwise all our endeavors usually are physical or mental. If you want to do anything, if you want to attain anything, we try to do something physical or something mental or combination thereof. Or maybe something with the senses. So let's try to understand the physical components of Ashtanga Yoga and mental components of Ashtanga Yoga in associated conditions, in needed conditions, in integrated conditions. Say for example, first let us consider the yama, physical component, the ahimsa. What are the physical components there for ahimsa? That is to restrain the hands and legs and gestures. Otherwise, your himsa can be manifesting through your motor organs, or can manifest through your hands and legs, or hand gestures and face gestures. So all those must be made mild. All those must be made mild, tender, for ahimsa. So see, these are the physical components, and then it becomes a marvelous means in associated conditions. So we have to restrain our hands and legs in pursuit of ahimsa. Then the gestures of the eyes and gestures of the face, Because from merely gesture of the face, you can violate ahimsa. From gesture of your eyes, you can violate ahimsa and be into himsa. So see, something physically needs to be done. Then coming to Satya. Satya, we need to basically restrain our oral organ, mouth. Because usually we think truth means it is something which is only with reference to speech organ, which is not really true. That's quite naive. Practicing truth also is on the plane of mind, psyche, consciousness. Anyway, physical component is that your face, your mouth should be restrained. You have to restrain your mouth. So in order to practice the truth, you also have to bother about use of the eyes. Because you can use the eyes to violate asatya, to violate satya and be in asatya. So the facial gesture also. It's just merely speaking the truth is not enough for practice of truth. And you can be deceiving the person by your facial gesture or by your blink of the eyes. So therefore, that's a physical component for satya. Asteya. Now usually asteya means we think it is stealing, and stealing takes place by our hands. So we need to restrain our hands, restrain our arms, so that we don't commit theft. Because we think asteya means not to steal. And violation of asteya by stealing and by theft. In that case, we need to restrain our hands through which we do this act of theft and act of stealing. Brahmacharya, again, all organs of the body, they have to observe a particular condition or practice to be in brahmacharya, and then aparigraha. Otherwise, the body works for possessiveness, etc. So there are bodily involvements to be possessive, to be grabbing, to be stacking up, to be hoarding. So see, we'll have to look at these factors, body factors. Now let's try to see the mind factors. In the mind factors, for you to be in ahimsa, what do you need to do? You must be often engaged in satsanga, shastra sangha, sadhana sangha. So the mind is cultured by those practices. Then there must be kshama buddhi. If you don't have pardoning nature, what is the chance that you will practice ahimsa? What is the chance that you will be in ahimsa? So that's called kshama buddhi. Daya buddhi. Daya buddhi means, daya means pardoning or having compassion. Now compassion is had in the mind. If you don't have compassion at all in the mind, what is the chance that you will be in ahimsa? Because most of himsa takes place because of lack of compassion, dearth of compassion. So that has to be in the mind. Compassion is in the mind, pardoning is in the mind, kshama is in the mind, daya is in the mind. Then also mendicant nature, mendicancy, that is also in the mind. Selflessness is also in the mind. If you have all these, selfishness, lack of pardoning, lack of compassion, dearth of compassion, then selfishness, what is the chance that you will be in ahimsa? There is hardly any chance. There is no chance that you will be in ahimsa. So these are we can identify the mental components of ahimsa. Then similarly, satya. Basically, you must be selfless, without selfishness. If you are selfish person, there is more chance you will violate satya. Then there must be straightforwardness, candidacy, simplicity, moderation to be practicing truth. If you are immoderate, intemperate, there is all chances you will violate satya. The astikya buddhi is also needed. Otherwise, you will not be able to practice in satya. So you need a noble mind, you need a quiet mind, serene mind, sublime mind, straightforward mind, candid mind, pure mind, mind without deceit to be practicing satya. Then asteya. To be practicing asteya, you need the renunciate nature of the mind. That's called tyaga vritti. You need nirapekshata. That is having no expectations, expectation free, expectation less, that is in the mind. Expectation lessness is in the mind. Then thirstlessness, which is again in the mind. If you are having thirst and hankering, what is the chance that you will be practicing asteya? Simplicity, moderation, etc. They are all in the mind. Unless you have that, you can't be in asteya vritti. You can't be intemperate and say still you are practicing asteya. You can't be immoderate and say that you are practicing asteya. And then brahmacharya is, it is very, very chaitik. You need sublime mind, sedate mind, contented mind, etc., pure mind, transparent mind to be in brahmacharya. So also for aparigraha, you must have spirituality in the mind, paramarthavad, paramarthavadi chitta dharma. Chitta must be gravitating towards paramartha. Then tyaga bhav, sanyasta vritti. All these are sublime conditions of the mind. Without that, you will not be able to practice these. So these are the physical and mental components, and now try to understand how associated body, associated mind will be very potent to be practicing these principles, adhering to these principles, not compromising with these principles. So in any endeavor we can identify mental component and physical component. That needs to be done in yoga as well. Ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, shaucha, santosha, tapasva, adhyaya, shravanadhan, asan, pranayam, pratyahar, and dhyana sadhana. We will have to identify the physical component and mental component, because we are used to this kind of division, the binary of body and mind components. Now here we have associated body and mind components. So see how they would be working marvelously. You cannot imagine these potencies in body components and mind components if you look at them in isolated condition, but in associated conditions, needed conditions, you can imagine the enormous bounty that they have. So, even in pranayam, then you can also consider asana and pranayam. There are physical components, there are mental components, and how these would be working marvelously with very rich resources in associated condition. Now, usually a common man fails to reckon with the force like breath, because we don't consider any breathly acts as important as physical acts and mental acts, but yoga gives importance to breathly acts. And then it's a great marvel how the breathly acts can work, breath acts can work. The sensely acts similarly. We do not know that how these acts of senses We know how the senses work in sensely act, like perceptive act, auditory act, olfactory act, tactile act, gustatory act. Apart from this, we do not imagine any act of the senses. But in associated condition, they really work marvelously. So that we need to understand here. How the physical, mental components would work, and in yoga you are aware of the breathly components and sensely components, how marvelously they can be working. So to be steady the mind, to be calm the mind, see the resources available in yoga. Common man doesn't imagine any physical component in be steadying the mind. However, that is there. Because the other day I told you that you can't be running, you can't be in a kinetic condition, running and trying to be steady the mind. Running like an athlete and then trying to be steady the mind. So, when the body is in such a motion, ferocity of motion, you can't be steady the mind. So only we will say that let's sit on a chair, that's all. Let's sit on a bench. Let us first sit quiet and then think of quietening the mind. You can't be keeping the body in a kind of physical workout and then trying to be steady the mind. So, from body front, not only that we try to keep the body steady, in yoga we go further with a quantum leap. It's not just common man, to be steady in mind, he settles on a chair or easy chair or on a bench. So that's the first requisition, and then he thinks of steadying the mind. Oh, the body is not used beyond that the limbs are steady, the limbs are quiet, and the limbs are in no motion, and discouraging any motion of the body, we try to use only that body, motionless body, to be steady in mind. But in yoga, with its study of anatomy, in this particular perspective, anatomy doesn't study the anatomy in this perspective that yoga does. So from body front also, there will be endeavors to be steady the mind, be calm the mind, quieten the mind, which all of you know that in certain posture your mind becomes easily quiet. For the mind to become quiet, you take a position like Janu Shirshasana. So it's quite a potent means to be going for the Purvottana Kriya, Paschimottana Kriya, like Janu Shirshasana, and quieten the mind. Or Viparit Karani, quieten the mind. Sarvangasana, quieten the mind. Halasana, quieten the mind. So we take recourse to these so-called postures, and we have facility to quieten the mind. How much can you quieten the mind? Say between Halasana on one hand and Viparita Shalbhasana on the other hand. So you will not opt for Viparita Shalbhasana to quieten the mind, you will opt for Halasana to quieten the mind. That is because that is from the body front to the body front, you know how to quieten the mind. So yoga will use the skeletal-muscular body and the positioning of the skeletal-muscular body for quietening the mind, such as skeletal-muscular body going into Halasana, skeletal-muscular body going into Janu Shirshasana. That's a great bounty that you can be steady the mind, be calm the mind. So this cardiovascular body, particularly in associated conditions, plays a marvelous role. Your shoulder blades can be mind quieteners. Your sternum can be mind quieteners. Your shoulders can be mind steadiers. Your shoulder blades can be mind steadiers. The various locations of the body and position of the body will help you to steady the mind, quieten the mind, still the mind, etc. And in associated conditions, it's a quantum leap. As far as the potentials of the body is concerned, it's a quantum leap as to how much they can quieten the mind or be steady the mind. Then physiological body. Common man will never think that liver can quieten the mind, steady the mind, pacify the mind, be steady the mind, or liver, stomach, colon, bladder, spleen, pancreas, intestines, duodenum, gallbladder to urinary bladder, all those organs which are in the belly region. The common man will never reckon these organs having potentials to be steady the mind. But in asanas, they are richly endowed with potentials to be steady the mind and be calm the mind. So asanas will tell you about it. Asanas will help you explore it. Asanas will help you develop conviction about this. That yes, I can quieten my mind through my lungs, heart, gallbladder, stomach, liver, intestines, spleen, pancreas, duodenum, up to urinary bladder. So every organ can be really used to quieten the mind. And that is because of the asanas, not otherwise. Not being asanas, you will not be able to have these resources available to you. So understand even the physiological body. Then the endocrine body. We all know that how much the mind depends upon endocrine function, the glandular functions. So we very well know that the state of the mind depends upon the glands and glandular functioning. Now asanas work as tremendous conditioners for glands, particularly the master glands, the pituitary pineal glands. Say what Shirshasana can be doing for pituitary pineal glands called master glands, and they'll have tremendous potencies to work on conditioning the mind towards steadiness, towards placidity, towards quietness, towards serenity. So that's why those who are used to doing Shirshasana as an asana, you know it's a great mind conditioner. Mind becomes steady. Exaltedly, not just steady, but exaltedly steady. This is not because of the head down position, but as to how it works on master glands. So also Sarvangasana. We all opt for Sarvangasana for mind to be quietened, mind to be made placid. So because again the master glands. Now how the glands can work in conditioning the mind. The suprarenal to keep the mind energetic, reinforced, steady with strength and power. Because the mind can be steadied even with the debility in the mind. But then the twistings will give you strength and power in the mind and then steadiness in the mind. Because they work with adrenaline. That's also called adrenal gland. So yoga can have marvels turned out of these various glands in associated conditions and not that much in isolated conditions. So from the front of the organic body also, is an enormous channel to take recourse to be steady the mind and be calm the mind. And then the breath, associated breath is a marvel. Associated breath of different confinements and different processes, different activities. They work a marvel. They work out a marvel. So also associated senses, associated mind. So if you are familiar with the sensely acts of asanas, mindly acts of asanas, you will come to know about it. So the body, mind, senses, motor system, cognitive system, they all work. And they work in tandem to be becoming means and instruments to be steady the mind. This is the marvel of yoga. So it doesn't just work on the mind to quieten the mind. It works from all the fronts of the embodiment to work on the mind, to be steady the mind, be calm the mind. And asanas will be an enormous laboratory for you to identify these potentials and then develop the skills in be steadying the mind and be calming the mind. So that is about the aspect of sadhana. Then again there is the satsanga, which enormously enriches the associated body, associated mind, associated senses, associated breath to help take a quantum leap in potentials to be steady the mind, be calm the mind. So yoga takes recourse to that as well. Satsanga, Shastra Sangha, Sadhana Sangha. Now here we have dealt just with the sadhanas of Ashtanga, which is a grosser outlook. In subtler outlook of yoga, we will come to know about Sthula Sharira Sadhana, Sukshma Sharira Sadhana, Karana Sharira Sadhana. So please recall, which was mentioned in earlier sessions. So yoga sadhana means is that it is not just yama niyama asana pranayam pratyahara. That's a gross view. So if you try to decipher, analyze, then you will come across this Sthula Sharira Sadhana, Sukshma Sharira Sadhana, Karana Sharira Sadhana. They enormously enrich the potentials to be steady the mind. Then Satvik Ahar Vihar Achar Vichar, again enormous influx qualitatively of Sattva Guna, which can work marvelously for this quality of the mind, for the mind to be steady. So try to understand the whole practice of yoga, not in a gross way, which we say Ashtanga Yoga is the practical aspect of yoga. But little scan will tell you that it is quite extensive measure. So the body component also will become richer by a comprehensive scheme of yoga. Mental component also will become richer by the comprehensive yoga, comprehensive scheme of yoga, inclusive scheme of yoga, of which you must be aware of, and that's why you need to get educated about that. And that is what we are trying here. So there are enormous resources to be steady the mind, and then you really can't have this kind of view that steadying the mind is something very utopian idea. It is not like that. So basically today we were trying to highlight the associated condition, needed condition, unified conditions for potentials. So let's end the session today with this point that we have considered. It's quite an elaborate point. I suggest you ponder over this, carry out for necessary explorations, observations, experimentations to really crystallize what associated body, mind, breath, senses, organ, psyche, consciousness can do. They are really a marvel. And therefore, advising quieten the mind or be steady the mind is not far-fetched. Because you are given the resources to be doing it. And when you have resources at hands, uh, you really efface the difficulty factor or difficult factor. Wherever you identify difficult factor or difficulty factor, that is really set aside when you are resourceful. So yoga makes you resourceful. Yoga makes you empowered, resourceful, and two together really efface that difficulty to the extent that one would imagine. I'm not saying it becomes very, 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 very easy. Yes, it is difficult, no doubt about it. But the degree of difficulty that one might envisage, imagine, think, presume, goes down significantly. There's tremendous cut down, and it is not that difficult that one imagined or one envisaged or one presumed. And that is very important. That if the things are projected to be very, very, very difficult, then we lose the motivation to be attempting it. So that's why this was just an attempt to make you aware of the resources which are available. When you are resourceful, the things are not that difficult. When you have resources, when you have qualification, when you have empowerment, find out how further there is a cut on difficulty. That is what I was trying to do today. So with that, let us end the session here. Namaskar all of you.